Merry meet. As a high priestess and an owner of a spiritual business, one of the most common questions that I get asked is from people who want to know how to connect to spirit, to the divine. Some of these people ask because they're just simply looking for a way to further deepen their connection, while others ask the question because they're actually truly feeling quite disconnected in that moment. So, whether you are just looking for some new practices and new techniques to help you connect deeper to your higher self, to the divine, to spirit, or if you're actually feeling disconnected right now in the present moment, this episode is for you. So, Merry Meet, I'm Aislin, and this is Ask Aislin, and I am here tonight talking about ways to connect to spirit even when you're feeling disconnected. So, just saying hi. Hi, Joelle and Danielle. Welcome, everybody. So, if you would like to leave a question in the chat, I will get to those all at the end of the Q&A. You can also leave any comments you want in the feed, and I'll be looking at those as we go. And also leave a heart or a thumbs up on the video, and that will just help this get into the feed of more people. So let's just dive right in. There's a lot to talk about today. So I first wanted to start with a definition of spirit. So from a witch's perspective, when we talk about spirit, there's generally a couple of different ways we are using this word. The first way is the way that I'm going to be using it in the video, and then I'm going to explain a second term or second definition of it as well. So usually we're referring to the fifth element called spirit. This is the element that creates all of the other four elements beneath it. Now, it is connected to the throat chakra, which is our fifth energy center. In Sanskrit, the word for the throat chakra, or throat chakra, is Vishuddhi, but the word for the element of spirit is Akasha. This actually translates to ether, and somewhere in the late 1800s, 1900s, we kind of got away from using that word, mainly because ether is a compound that we use in the science that we talk about in the scientific world and in chemistry. So we have started usually saying the word akasha, or from a witch's perspective, referring to this fifth element as spirit. Now, this is our creativity center. So our throat chakra is a creativity center of the body, and it has a very unique role in that it connects our earthly incarnation, so our body, to what is beyond us. And our third eye and our crown is what opens up and connects us to what's outside, to the divine, for example. So obviously, this energy is very important, and sometimes it can feel easier to connect to that energy than others. Now, another way that we use that word spirit is sometimes to refer to great spirit. So our tradition of witchcraft makes a differentiation between these two usages of the word. So when we're saying spirit, we're talking about that energy that we all have, and we're talking about great spirit, we're often talking about the God form. So basically, the unifying force that is the creative connection of all things on the planet. So whatever you want to call that, God or goddess, the god or goddess, that energy that's even beyond them, that creates everything. So for the rest of this video, we're going to be using the first definition, which is spirit, which is that elemental energy within us. Now, this energy is useful for us when we need to connect to something beyond ourselves. Like I mentioned, sometimes it's easier to connect than others. So I just want to normalize this, because if you are going through something very hard, if you're going through a lot of emotional trauma or physical trauma, and this could even include surgeries. I recently had a surgery. I'm going to be having another one soon. So even when we are in these spaces, regardless of where that trauma came from, what it does is it forces our body to turn all of its attention in and direct it towards the body, towards that place that needs to heal. So whether that is an emotional hurt, a physical hurt, or you're just simply going through a lot of trauma, it's important to normalize that it's going to be harder to connect during those times. Even when we want to connect, it may feel more difficult. So if you are in that acute state, I think the best thing you can do for yourself is to just be patient. Just know that connection can be harder during that time and that it will get easier. But if you are having that issue, listen on, because there's going to be a lot of strategies and techniques that I'm going to offer in this video that may help you if you are feeling that sense of disconnection. Now, I think that one of the other things that I so often hear that seems to be getting in people's way is time. So the issue we have here is that in order to truly connect, because we're earthly beings, but we're also spiritual beings, in order to truly connect, we have to have some kind of a dedicated practice that is going to strengthen our ability to connect. Now, what are we going to do if we don't have enough time? So I have this problem too. In an ideal world, if the world were perfect, I would dedicate 2 to 3 hours to my spiritual practice a day. And there was a time in my life when I was able to do that. When I worked one job before I started my business, it was absolutely possible for me to do that. But juggling 2 full-time jobs now makes that quite hard. And I know a lot of you out there as well struggle with time. So this is going to be something we're going to address here. This is why I have created many little bite-sized practices that you can use, and I'm going to offer you some suggestions so you can still connect even in your limited amount of time. So I hope, and I shouldn't even say I hope, I will eventually be able to get back to my 2 to 3 hours of my dedicated practice. But till then, this is some of what I've done, especially on the days when there isn't much time at all. So you can condense your practice down into, like I said, these little bite-sized 10 to 15-minute chunks. Even 5 minutes is enough if you can do that almost every day. So it doesn't have to be every day. I don't like extremes because I think they set us up for failure. As an educational therapist, it's one of the things I teach my students. So we want to be careful about extreme language and saying we're to do something every single day, because inevitably we will fail. And then that makes it harder to actually make it a sustainable practice. But if you can commit to 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, almost every day, most days, then you're going to see a profound difference. Now, the key to all of it, though, is consistency. So if you want to connect to the spirit, if you want to connect to the divine, you're going to need a dedicated practice of some kind. Now, sometimes you will find that connection happens passively. So, for example, you go outside and you just happen to be quite open and receptive that day, and you notice all the synchronicities around you. So this is a very passive way of connecting to spirit. You did not do anything in general to stimulate that connection. It just simply happened. But most of the time, if we really want to connect and we really want to know that we're going to keep that connection, then we're going to need to be more proactive. So I'm going to give you some numbers here, because I think for anybody who ever has that voice in the head that says you don't have enough time, this is how you're going to combat that voice. This is what I use as well. So there are 1,440 minutes in every single day. Now you're awake about two-thirds of that. That would be if you're sleeping for 8 hours. Many people don't even sleep that much, so you're actually awake for more than the 960 minutes. Now, if you were to devote 10 to 15 minutes a day to your spiritual practice, that is 1 to 1.5% of your waking time. That's not even 1 to 1.5% of your whole day, just of the waking time. So when you think about it, if your ego, or that saboteur archetype that we all have internally inside of us, it's always getting in our way, if that starts to talk to you and tell you that you don't have enough time, this is how you're going to answer it. You have enough time for 1%, to spare 1% to devote to connecting to spirit and therefore amplifying your spiritual practice. And surely sacrificing that 1% of your daily waking time is worth deepening this connection if you really want that. Okay, so that's what I just say. If you need to combat that voice, there you go. There's your numbers. Okay, so what can we do? All right, Danielle says she desperately needs this tonight. I know, I was actually thinking of some of you when I was making this, when I was planning this video out. I know everybody could use this. Okay, so here are some little practices you can do. So some of these practices are going to be small things that you can just do in the general day. You set these things up and they will begin to work for you. And then others will be like small little bite-sized practices that you can use. Okay. So the first thing is to consider your natural affinities. So the reason for this is because it's hard for us to force ourselves to do something that we're having trouble doing, if we're going to force ourselves to do something that's not going to come natural to us. So I'm just going to tell, like, so let's suppose that you are starting out and you really hate yoga, for example. If you're forcing yourself to do yoga, it's going to become a drudgery and a chore. So you need to find a practice that you are naturally drawn to because it's going to make it easier. Now, on the flip side of that, I feel that practices that we have great aversions towards actually have a lot to teach us. But when we're struggling, those aren't the practices to start with. Those are the ones to work up to eventually because I do think they'll have gifts. So, for example, within my own yoga practice, there are certain poses that I really don't like. But yet, I know that those poses have something great to offer me. So I didn't start with those poses. I started with the ones that I really liked. As I got better at it, I moved on to the ones that I struggled with or really had an aversion towards in order to seek the gifts that they could offer me. Okay, so you want to think about what kinds of things are you most drawn to, and those are the ones that you want to start with, especially when it's hard. So, one thing that's very simple to do is just think about the element that you feel most connected to and start there. Now, eventually, you'll want to look at the element you're not connected to, but that's not where we want to start because it's going to make it hard. So I'm going to have several episodes coming up that are each devoted to an element, and I'll be giving lots of advice on how to connect to the element. But just for now, briefly, if you feel that you're most connected to air, go to a place where there's a lot of air. So if you can get to the top of a mountain or a hill, if you can climb it, great. If you can't, there's lots of places where you can find gondolas or different trains or things that will actually go up to the top of an area like this, and then you can enjoy it from there. Any place where you can have wind blowing, there are certain locations that even when it's not very windy other places, those locations get windier than others. If you can find those places, go to those places and let the wind just blow over you. This very simple gesture, it will help you connect to the element of air, and it can make profound effects in your life. So let's say you are more connected to fire. So fire, you're not going to climb down into a volcano. If you can go near a volcano, most of us can't, but if you can go near one, that would be a great way to connect to fire. But for most of us, this is not going to be realistic. So you can light as many candles as you want. Sit in a room filled with candles is a way to connect to fire. You can light a controlled fire if you have a fireplace. It's getting closer to spring and summer now, so you might want to go outside and have a controlled fire there. If you have a fire pit, I've mentioned in the last episode, I found this thing called the Celestial Cauldron at Home Depot, no less. I believe it was $100 or less, and it's just like a big cauldron. Put it outside, you can put some wood in it, and you can create a controlled fire. You can also get little cauldrons, different places. You can order these online. You can find them at witchy stores. They're not all that much. This is a nice size. They make them bigger. My friend, Beth, she gave me this little tiny one for my birthday this year. Just adorable. You can fit a little charcoal in it, and you can have a little controlled fire that way. Now, if you are most drawn to water, you will want to connect to places where there's running water. If you can get to a place with naturally running water, like creeks, rivers, oceans, lakes, waterfalls are great. Get to those, get to those. If you can't, go in the shower and just let the water roll over your shoulders and make that a dedicated practice, not just you're washing off in the shower. The pool, the hot tub, any place that you can immerse yourself in water is a way to connect. And then finally, if earth is the element that draws you in the most, mountaintops, very good. Again, you can get the element of air there as well. That's why I love the mountains so much, is I get air and earth at the same time. But you can also go to forests or caves. Just go in amongst the trees. We've talked in the group about earthing. Take your shoes off and just feel the ground. If you're able to walk barefoot or in stocking feet in your house, I rarely wear shoes unless I have to go outside. And it's a nice way to connect and ground down to the earth. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to be doing full dedicated episodes to all four of the elements, including we'll do a whole other one on spirit. But for now, those are some ways to connect to the elements. And then it also goes to other things as well. What do you feel most connected to? Those are going to be the places to start. Okay, so second idea, and I know that some of you are already doing this, and if you are doing it, this will just validate you. And if you're not doing it, hopefully this will inspire you to try. And this is tracking your energy, your emotions, and the lunar cycles. So you will want to get a journal of some kind or a notebook where you can record this. It's very simple, it takes just a couple minutes each day, and you are going to look up the lunar phase. So you're going to find out what type of phase we're in. If we're in the full moon or we're in the waning crescent, whatever it is, you're going to write that down. And then you're going to write down 3 pieces of information, just a few words each. How do you feel energetically? Are you low energy? Are you hyper today? How do you feel emotionally? And how are you feeling physically? And you're going to write all those 3 things down. Now, the thing about this practice, even though it's very, very simple and takes very little time, is that you need consistency and you'll need to look at this over several cycles. So you may not see any patterns if you just do it for 1 month or like less than a month. That's really not going to be enough. But if you can do it for 2 or 3 or even 4 months, you are going to start to see patterns. And this is a way that you can connect to the energy outside of you and how it's affecting you internally. Now, if you are a bleeder who has an active menstrual cycle, I also recommend that you track that. And you will add that information. That will be an extra piece of information to track. So if you don't already have an app on your phone that will do that, Stardust is a great one. I like it a lot because it also tracks the lunar cycles. So you can actually get Stardust even if you're not menstruating, because it actually tells you what the lunar cycle is in it. And then what you will want to do is record the start of your period, and you're going to record that in the moon journal, and then you're going to be able to see if there are any connections between your menstrual cycle and the lunar cycle. Okay, so this is a nice way, and like I said, you're going to have to do this 2 or 3 months in order to really see any patterns. All right, so next up, this is another general way that you can just add this energy of trying to connect to spirit in your life, and this is build an altar. If you already have an altar, build another one. So this can be as simple as placing some candles on top of a bookshelf. I think bookcases are great places. Like I actually have 2 different altars in the house that are just on the top of bookcases. And so eventually you might add stones and crystals, statuary, items that you found in nature when you were out connecting to that element that you were drawn to, and you place those on the bookcase. You can eventually put a little cloth over it to make an altar cloth. Now, there are many different kinds of altars. We can get really complex with it. I will likely do a whole episode on altars at some point. So let's talk about if we're going to make one a little bit more complex than just using the bookcase. So I like the lac table. This table back here behind me, this is a lac table from IKEA. I'm pretty sure they still sell these. It was $9 when I bought it. And they make a larger version as well that's twice as long. What I like about these tables is, number one, they're cheap, they're pretty affordable, they last a long time. I've had that table for like 20 years. And number two, they're low to the ground. So you can sit on a cushion, and it's a nice way to sit at your altar. The other thing about that is that you can get an altar cloth of any kind. It doesn't have to be some fancy, expensive altar cloth that you got from a witchcraft shop. You can use fabric from Michael's. You can use fabric from Joann. Joann's even better. They have a lot. I love velvet. You can get pieces of velvet. You can even get the scraps that are left over, and a lot of times they're a great size for an altar like that. That altar cloth back there is a scarf from H&M, and it was on the clearance rack. So you can find stuff at the thrift stores. You can find stuff, on clearance racks. Scarves are a really cool way to make neat altar cloths. That one has like all the planets and the stars and everything, which I'm really into. So let's talk about different types of altars. So there is a general and permanent altar. So this right here, for the most part, is a general and permanent altar. It doesn't really change a lot. I add some things to it, but it's just always here in the room. Now, there are also devotional altars. So a devotional altar would be devoted to a specific deity. So if you work with deity in your practice, you can make an altar and you just put it somewhere in your house. It can have a picture. You could make a collage. I've done that. That's a neat thing to do, is make collages. You can find pictures of the deity, make a collage and like hang it above the altar. You can get statuary. You can do some research, find out what kind of offerings this deity likes. You can leave those on the altar, and then just use your intuition, whatever calls to you, what they're asking you to gather. So that would be a devotional altar. Another type of altar would be a temporary altar, like a seasonal altar. This is a really neat idea. It's just every Sabbath, put up an altar for that season. So we've talked a lot in previous episodes. Sabbats don't just come and go. It's just one day of energy and it's gone. It's a full season until the next one begins. We're in Beltane season until mid-June. So build a Beltane altar. Look up some of the correspondences or go back and watch the Beltane video from last week, and you can build up your Beltane altar and then start to shift that altar when Litha comes, and then shift that altar again when Lunaza comes, and just follow the cycle of the wheel that way. And even if you don't know a lot about the Sabbats, just think about the energy of the season. We're moving into summer. We're in spring. We'll be moving into summer. So what things speak to you about summer? And then when fall comes, how would you change the altar in order to change with the seasons? Another type of altar is a temporary but intentional altar. So, for example, I have an active altar in the house to draw in my baby. So, if you have an intention that you are actively working on, like wealth or abundance or creativity or a new job or love, build a temporary altar dedicated to just that thing. And then there are also ancestral altars. So these can be similar to a deity, a devotional altar, except that instead of devoting them to the deity, we are devoting them to an ancestor, whether it's one that we knew, one that we knew of that was in our lineage, or simply and just the general witch ancestors. We all have we call this the witch blood, like the ancestors that were the witches before us. And you can dedicate an altar to them. And also, you can dedicate an altar to any pets who have crossed over. So that's another type of altar that we have in the house. It has all of the ashes and the pictures and different mementos of all of our dearly departed pets. So the simple act of just building an altar on the top of your bookcase can have a big effect on your ability to connect. And another thing I really like to do, because I think this is so simple and such an easy way to just connect to just the energy around you, is to burn a candle that you start on the new moon, and you burn it all the way through till the next new moon. You start a new candle. So back on the altar, there are 2 candles there. So they are getting down there because we're pretty progressed through the lunar cycle, but I started those on the new moon. And then every single night, I burn them for an hour or 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, a little less. And then eventually on the last night, the dark moon, I just burn it all the way down, and I start the next night with the new candle. So it's just, like I said, very simple, but a way to connect to that movement of the energy. And I have to tell you, it made a big difference for me. So if you haven't tried it, try it. I am just looking to see if there's anything in the comments before I go on, and I'm going to talk about ways to spiritualize your life. Okay. Joelle was saying she loves the water and she meditates in the tub almost every night. Exactly. So it is such a way to connect to spirit, is just being immersed in that element. And then I see that Joelle asked about birth control, and it does not matter. You can still track your menstrual cycle if you're on birth control. Just know that birth control is like unnatural. It's an unnatural period that it creates. So it's not quite the same as a natural cycle, but you nevertheless can still track your energy, because your period is energy that you're releasing every month. So it's important to see what day that's getting released on, and then look at that in the general picture of the rest of it, the lunar cycle and everything. Okay, so here are some just more general ways to spiritualize your life. And as I was making these notes earlier today, I realized I think this is a whole episode in and of itself. There's going to be a lot of episodes coming out of just this first one. So, spiritualize your life through simple practices. Okay, so these are some very simple practices that many people might not even think about. So, the first one is just simply a daily gratitude practice. Anything that you can do to pause for a minute or two every day and just send out some energy of gratitude. It is a way to connect to the universe. What we're doing with all of this is we're making gestures towards the universe, towards spirit, towards the divine, and we're telling them, I would like to talk. That's essentially what we're doing. It's like sending, like to text to your friend. Do you want to set up a time to chat, later this weekend? That's what we're doing with all of these. And so if we do, the more of these that we do, we're basically telling the universe, look, I'm open. I want to talk. I'm ready. I'm receptive. So your daily gratitude practice can be as simple as just writing down 3 things that you're grateful for before you go to bed or when you get up. I have a teacher who she always said to do 7 minutes in the morning. She says that those first 7 minutes of the day, she is a why am I forgetting her title? It'll come back to me. But she was trained. She said those first 7 minutes of the day are the most potent spiritual time of the day. And basically what it does is sets the tone for the rest of your day. So if you wake up and the first thing you do, like I do this too, is grab the phone and check your messages, this is the energy that we're setting for the day, like what type of day this is going to be. But if instead we close the eyes and she says to list off, it's like basically a gratitude inventory where you just list off all the things you're grateful for. And many of the days it's just the same things. I'm grateful that my car is paid off. I'm grateful that, the warmer weather is coming. I'm grateful that all my cats are healthy. So just listing off all the things that you're grateful for. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. It's just literally listing them off. And she even recommends that you set a timer for 7 minutes and you just basically speak to the universe until the timer goes off at the end. And if you run out of things to say, you just simply say, I'm grateful. So that's a really neat idea. And like I said, I'm going to do a whole episode on spiritualizing your life, and they will go into greater detail in all these practices I'm about to talk about. Now, the next one is blessing a glass of water and drinking it upon waking. Now, you can put lemon into it or honey or anything you want, or it can just be plain old water. But the idea behind this is that you are infusing it with blessings and then you're internally taking it in and you're basically taking in that positive energy. So if you have ever seen anything about Emoto's work on water molecules, and I'm going to post something in the group, I think tomorrow, about it. It was a study where he was looking at different water molecules and how they changed depending on what people said to them. So people would say, I love you, I love you. And then they would freeze the water and they would look at the crystals and they would be these beautiful crystals. And then the people would say, I hate you into the water. And they would freeze it and it's startling. The pictures looked so different. And so there's been criticism of the study because, like many studies that come from the East, there isn't a lot of validation, though there was a double-blind research study in Tokyo that actually backed up some of his findings. But I feel when it comes to magic and energy and things like that, we don't need all these scientific studies. I'm a science teacher myself, but there are things that our science can't explain yet. So I don't need the studies to look at that evidence and see that there's something very interesting that happens when we are charging water. So where we're going with this is if you send positive energy into that water, even you can have a little affirmation like, I love you if you're having trouble loving yourself, or you're brave if you're having trouble feeling your courage. And send that into your water and then drink that every morning. And this is just a way to infuse yourself with that energy. You can also do this with your food. Blessing your food is similar to prayer or to the grace that Christians might say before a meal. But you are, again, infusing it with your energy. So just taking a few moments. So like I like to, if anybody's ever been to a ritual where I've shown you the nail bed energy raising exercise, you just take your nail beds like this and you rub them together vigorously. You do this for about a minute. You're going to build up a lot of energy in the hands, and then you'll just place that over your food and then just direct the energy into the food, and then you consume the food, and then you're taking in that positive energy. So another thing that you can do with food, so a couple other these are, because these are like spiritual practices that will spiritualize your daily life, is to eat whole foods and eat as close to nature and as close to the season as you possibly can. So we are very spoiled in the idea that we have food that is transported thousands of miles to come to us, and it's great and it's convenient. But what it does is it's a disconnect to the actual season and the cycles around us. So that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy food that isn't native to where you are and isn't seasonal. But the more that you can bring the seasonal foods into your life, the more you actually do connect to the energy around you, which raises your vibration and therefore connects you more to spirit and the divine. So one of the simplest things to do is when you go to the supermarket, go to the produce section and find out what's on sale. Those are likely the seasonal foods. Again, I'm going to do a whole episode on this, devoting it to these spiritual ways to spiritualize your daily life. You can also cook with intention. So if you are the cook of the house, you can stir your food clockwise if you want to bring intentions into it, stir it counterclockwise if you're trying to release things. And this is a way that you can bring intentions into the food that you're eating. And if you're not the cook, you could still stir food that way. So when the food is brought to your plate, you can stir it and stir the intentions into it before you eat. And then also using essential oils is another way to just be uplifted in your energy. Find oils that you are drawn to. You don't necessarily have to look them up. If there's a scent you like, go get that scent. There's some natural affinity that you have towards it. And I fully believe that the things that we are attracted to are things that we often need. The thing I will mention, and I'll go into this in another episode later, is beware of synthetic fragrances. If you're not aware of some of the dangers of synthetic fragrances, I would suggest looking that up because they can really bring your vibration down. Febreze is really bad for you from the perspective of like your hormonal system and everything. So the more that you can get get natural fragrances and those natural essential oils, the better. And you can get those. There's lots of places where you can get them. You just need to look for the word natural essential oils. Okay, and then surrounding yourself with positive vibrations is a final way to spiritualize your daily life. So it's really important to consider what you're watching and what you're listening to and the people that you surround yourself with. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't watch things that are disturbing, you can't listen to things that are disturbing, but just be aware of it. Be aware of how it affects you. I know for myself, it was a big game changer when I started cutting out shows that were disturbing. And some people are okay with them. It really wasn't working well with me. And I noticed that my dreams were a lot more peaceful. I noticed that my energy was a lot more peaceful. I felt a lot calmer when I was able to remove those things, and the news was a big one. So I especially had to be very careful during COVID. I just kind of had to remove myself from the news at some point. All right, so let's talk about some other practices that you can do. So these are going to be like your little bite-sized practices. So what you're aiming to do with these next few things I'm going to talk about is you're going to find one or more of these that you resonate with, and you're going to want to set up 5 to 10 minutes to 15 minutes if you can stretch it, and you're going to try to bring in one or more of these practices on most days. Okay, and you can alternate them. You'll see what I mean when we get into it. You can kind of mix and match these, and you can even stack them on top of each other if you have days where you have more time. Okay, so the first one is do a daily oracle card or tarot card draw. And I'm just going to explain a way to try this that might be a little different than you've done before, because I'm not going to tell you to throw the book out, but I don't want you to look at the book for this practice, okay? Because it's a slightly different kind of practice. So what you want to do is, if you have a lot of decks, like for me, I have like a ton of decks, so I don't know many of them. There's a few that I use very regularly, so I wouldn't choose one of those decks. I'm going to choose a deck I don't know very well. If you have a deck that you know really well, I would suggest go get a deck, a new one that you don't know at all. And you are unfamiliar with the meanings. That's the important thing. You want to be unfamiliar with the meanings of the cards. Now you're going to use the power of synchronicity to choose. I suggest one card. You could choose 3 a day. I wouldn't choose more than that, but I think one is sufficient to start this exercise. And you're going to use that. You're going to set an intention that you are using the card as a way to connect to spirit and then to the higher self. Okay, and you're looking for answers. And the answers can be broad. You could just draw the card for an answer, general advice, or a message that spirit wants to give to you, or you can ask a question if you desire. Then you are going to pull a card, and you're not going to look at the guidebook. And you just want to look at the imagery and look at the words, if there are words on that card, and let what comes to you come to you. Okay, now later, if you want, if you get curious, you can go in and look at all the meanings. But in the beginning, just see what comes to you and trust that what comes to you, what your intuition is telling you, is true. So one thing is that we rely way too much on outside authority in our lives. We give so much power to others around us, sources of authority. Most of the time, we forget how much insight we truly have ourselves. And this exercise is designed to help you build up that. So if we simply turn ourselves over to the authority of the book, then we basically thwart the effort of this exercise. Now, this is not to negate people who are truly gifted in reading. That's a totally different kind of tarot or oracle card reading. Go to your readers. There are people who are so gifted in that. But for the purpose of this exercise, you're trying to strengthen your own ability to connect. Okay, so you want to use your own impressions and insights. Jot them down. Jot them down over time. Put them in with your moon cycle. When you do your little moon cycle journal, put your card there too. Look at patterns over time. And if you try using your oracle cards or your tarot cards this way, just see what happens, and you might be surprised how much connection you can actually get from a very simple exercise like this. But the key here is looking at what do the words and the images mean to you, not to an outside authority. Okay, so a few more we'll talk about here. The next one is candle gazing. So many people have heard me talk about candle gazing before. So candle gazing is a great way to connect to the divine and to spirit because of the stimulation of the third eye. So during candle gazing, it's very simple. You dim the lights. I prefer to have some kind of a salt lamp or something low lit in the background, but you can be in a total blackness as well. You're going to bring a candle. You want to make sure that it's around eye level. So you would want to probably be seated. Like if you were going to sit at an altar on a cushion, you could do that. You could sit at your kitchen table and just put the candle there. You just want to be primarily at eye level. And then you are just going to gaze into the candle. And if you're new to the practice, it can be difficult. You may find that after just a few seconds, your eyes start to water and they really want to close. So you just close them for a moment and rest them. And then you open back up and then you continue the gazing. And then whenever it feels like they need to close them and then open them up and continue. And just do this for a few minutes and see what happens. But it's a very good way to stimulate the third eye. And this can be a practice that you swap in. So like ideally what you would do is if you like the majority of these practices and you're somebody who likes variety, you try one on one day and try another on the next day and then another on the next day. You can even have a little calendar with all of them on and what you've tried. And then some you won't like and discard those and come back to maybe another time and see if your affinity for them has changed. So the next type is the walking meditation. So this is another form. I'm not really actually going to talk about regular meditation tonight because these are alternative forms. But you could always, regular meditation, if that's part of your practice, that can also be brought in as, 5 to 10 minutes of meditation as part of a spiritual practice. So during the walking meditation, you will find an area that you can walk back and forth on. And it doesn't need to be long at all. It just, you really need maybe a few yards, like I would say like 10 yards is probably enough, or just enough that you can make about 10 paces, 10 to 20 paces. And you will walk in one direction, and then we get to the end, you turn around, and then you walk back to the other direction. And then you get to that end, and then you turn, you walk back the other direction. And you just do this for 5 to 10 minutes. Some people like to put the arms behind them, and you go into this kind of light meditative state, and it can be a really great way to connect to spirit. So another practice is breath work. So you could bring in breath work on a day, on a certain day. Now I'm going to share with you 3 easy breaths, and what you can do is, if you like one of them, just do that one for 5 or 10 minutes. You can also do all 3 of them for 3 minutes each, and try that. And you could swap. See, there's the beauty to this is because we can swap different ones in and out and try different things. But the key to it is that we're always doing something in almost every day. Okay, and if you get to every day, even better. So the 3 breaths that I'm going to show today are the healing square breath. So I've talked about all 3 of these before, so some of you are going to be familiar with them. So the healing square breath is very easy. You will inhale for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then hold for a count of 4, and then you repeat that. And this is why we call it the healing square, because each of those 4 counts, inhale, hold, exhale, hold, is one side of the square. So that breath is very calming. The next breath is the breath of glow, and it's more activating. So this breath is a little bit on the stimulating side, so you just want to be careful with it. Don't want to go too fast. If you feel like lightheaded, then you might be getting too much oxygen, or not. You might be getting more than you're used to. Very easy breath though. You just put your hand on the belly, and it's like the fire breath, but not quite as fast, and you can close your eyes during it. And then you're just going to make like a pumping motion with the belly. So it's like a very passive inhale, and then on the exhale, you just pump your belly. And it's very slow too, like, so you can do it like, sometimes when I show it in ritual, I clap. So it'd be like about that pace. Very, very slow, but can be nice and activating. If you're having trouble with the breath, open the mouth and act like you're fogging up a mirror. Put your hand on the belly, and that's the motion. Then close the mouth. Okay, so that's called breath of glow. So if you like that one, do it for 5 minutes. Or if you don't like it or not sure if you like it, do it for a couple minutes and do it with that healing square breath. And then another breath is called the Brahmari breath. I love this one. This is the bee's breath. Brahmari is the god of bees. And the bee's breath is very simple. You're going to put your fingers to your ears. Now, you're not going to want to do this while you're listening to me, or you're not going to hear me say what I'm instructing. But when it comes time, you will close your ears off so that you go internally into your head. You'll take an inhale, and on the exhale, you make a buzzing sound with your mouth closed. And you will hear that sound in your head. And then when that breath is over, then you just inhale again, and you start the humming sound with the mouth closed, with the ears closed as well. So that breath has the added bonus of being a stimulator of the throat chakra. So if we are trying to connect to spirit and we are stimulating the throat chakra at the same time, it's even better. So like I said, you can do 3 minutes of each of those 3 breaths, and there you have yourself a little 10-minute practice. Or if you want 5 minutes, just try one of them for 5 minutes. Another practice you can do is devotional singing or chanting. This will be a whole episode in and of itself, but I wanted to share with you the 7 seed sounds in case you would like to get started with a form of chanting. These 7 sounds will balance your entire energetic chakra system. So starting with the root, the sound is lum. Now each of these is spelled with an A in the middle, so this would look like L-A-M, but in Sanskrit would be pronounced lum. So you would intone lum. Now when you do it, you want to make sure, like for all of these, that you do it in a very deep, deep part of your body. So we don't want to go like lum, like we're singing or something like that. You want to go lum, because you really want to feel it in the body. Okay, so lum for the root, vam for the sacral chakra. So V-A-M, vam. Rum for the solar plexus, rum, R-A-M. Yum, I always like this one for the heart, yum, Y-A-M, pronounced yum. And then for the throat is hum, H-A-M, pronounced hum, hum. And then finally, the third eye is om. Now, om is actually spelled A-U-M. And then for the crown, it's just silence. So if you were doing the entire sequence, you would chant lum, vum, rum, yum, hum, om, and then there'd be a silent breath. And then you would repeat it. Then you go back down to the root. And this is a way to just balance the entire system very quickly. Seed sounds are sounds that actually they have more than just the meaning. They are actually conveying energy. So when we intone them, we're actually inviting that energy into our body. So it's very, it can be a very profound experience if you do this. And just I need to do it for a couple of minutes, and that can be another one of your practices. Okay, so you can mix and match any of these. I forgot one more. One more is like Kundalini energy exercises. So I've shown a couple of these before. One is the spinal twists. So you take an inhale, and you twist to the left. And then on the exhale, you twist to the right. Inhale to the left, exhale to the right. This is a big deal. It gets so much energy moving in the solar plexus and just really gets your internal fire going. And then you can do shoulder shrugs. So you inhale, shoulders up, exhale them down. Inhale them up, exhale them down. Inhale them up, exhale them down. So you could bring those two in, do them each for a couple of minutes, and there you've got another practice. So the deal here is that you mix and match these. Aim for 10 to 15 minutes, 5 at the minimum, and just bring in what you can. Layer and stack the practices if you have more time. But the real key here isn't the time, it's the regularity and the repetition. Now, when you're feeling the most disconnected is the time for you to try to connect the most. And it might seem counterintuitive because during moments of disconnection, there's a natural inclination to pull away, to kind of go deep within. But if we can resist this, this can be a time to push outward and actually connect more because we crave that. We need the connection. So if you start doing something even very, very small during that time and you stick to it and make it a daily practice, you're going to find that your feelings of disconnection start to ease. So, and I promise you, this is something that happened to me. So I know this from personal experience. It just takes these little bite-sized practices, but it's the key to it is you don't do it a couple of times and stop. You got to do it and you got to continue it. That's the key to all of it. Okay, so I do want to say, I'm about to go into the Q&A and I have a question that was sent to me earlier, but I have a mini course coming out that's called the Short and Sweet Spiritual Self-Practice, and it is going to go through all of this in much greater detail. And in fact, it actually gives you the bonus of all of it, and probably the best part of it, is that it gives you all these practices in little videos that are 5 to 10 minutes that you can just stack on top of each other. It comes with a calendar that can help you plan out your week and everything. It gives you the moon cycle tracking stuff. So it's basically everything I'm talking about. It's your one-stop shop for how to set up your simple, short and simple and sweet spiritual self-practice. So that is coming out sometime this summer. It's all finished. It just needs to be recorded and put out there. So just so you know, that will be coming soon. And coming up, I'm going to say that to the end. Let's look at the Q&A for now, and then I'll tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Okay, I just wanted to go in here for a second. Okay. So Jen said the Balance app has been very helpful for her with meditation and gratitude. They have a great wake-up meditation, and it's free for the year. That's very cool. Yeah, very cool. I'm actually not familiar with that app, but any app that will kind of track you and help, provide you with little meditations and things, I think that's so great. And the gratitude in it as well. And yeah, Jen was talking about the water study. Yeah, the water study is so cool. When I first saw it, I was so so intrigued by it. Okay, so I have a question here from Nancy, and it's a good one. So I'm going to go into it now. And if any of you have any other questions, drop them in the chat, and I'm answering everything until there's no more questions. Okay, so Nancy said, and I hope that I understand her question. I think I understand it. But if I don't, Nancy, when you are able to watch this video later, let me know, and I will address it if I'm missing the question, okay? So she says, when she's working with chakras, if the energy goes up, but the lower three chakras are grounded, she said, I guess I need to know how to ground and keep the energy going up at the same time, if that makes sense. And she says she knows what she's trying to say, but she feels like she's not making sense. But I think I understand what you're saying, Nancy. You are talking about the idea of we want to ground down into the root, but we're also always talking about our energy being raising up through the system. So if I'm correct, I think the metaphor of the tree is the most useful metaphor here. So the roots of a tree, think about the roots of an actual tree. It grows down into the earth and it anchors the tree down into the soil. But that doesn't mean that the nutrients, which are energy, that doesn't keep them from flowing up all the way up to the very tips of the top of the leaves, right? So the same thing occurs with our energetic system. So the reason that we want to ground down is that we want to anchor our root down. And then this creates the stability and the security that we need. From there, we can then begin lifting the energy up through the body. Now, you mentioned the three lower chakras. And so I've mentioned that before. Those three lower chakras, they operate as a trinity. So we have the root, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus all kind of working together, right? So we're really grounding down in the root, but those other two are helping us ground that part of our physical body down. Now, when we have that stability, what it means is that it's much easier for the energy to rise up through the body. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about raising that energy, because eventually we want it just flowing straight through the body and out the top of the head through the crown. Now, similarly, in Chinese medicine, there is this idea of we pick up energy from the earth. So it's believed that we actually draw that energy into our body from any part of the body that touches the ground, which is even more reason to be doing earthing or to be going barefoot at times. But any place that you're touching the ground, you're drawing in energy. And then from there, that energy flows upwards into the system for our use. So if you notice, in both of these systems, we have that same kind of idea of grounding down into the earth and connecting to the earth in order to draw that energy up and then have that flow up through the body. So if you work to balance your energetic system as a whole, you'll have that proper flow of energy. But I think that's how to explain why we ground down in order to lift the rest of the energy up. So I hope that helps. If it didn't answer the question, let me know if I kind of missed the point of it. Okay, so let me see here. And I see Joelle put in Insight Timer. I love Insight Timer is my personal favorite as well. And that is a free app. And then there is a upgrade to the paid version, which is pretty affordable too. But Insight Timer provides all kinds of daily practices, meditations, has some little classes on it even. And it provides the timer where you can put some music on or just some soothing nature sounds. And so if you are trying to time these practices, like these 5 to 15-minute practices, a timer like that is really cool. You can put on some neat music and then set the timer for 5 or 10 minutes and then do your practice. All right, so and then the app, and then Daniel was asking about the app, and I think the one that Jen mentioned was called the Balance app. There's a lot of different ones, but I assume if you just go into the App Store, you can find it. I don't personally know that one, but I do know Insight Timer. Okay, so any other questions, put them in the chat here. And if anybody watches this back in replay and has a question, put it in the chat. I come through afterwards and I look for any questions and things I missed during the live. But I want to let you know what's coming up. So in next week, I believe we are going to be talking about some shadow work tips because we're going to be smack in the middle of the dark moon at that point. That's on 5/17. On 5/24, we're going to be talking about dream working. And for those in our Shadow Seekers membership, we're about to go into a whole module on dream working. Um, and then on 5/25, there's going to be a very special ritual for releasing fear. And this is free to everyone. And this is going to kick off the opening of the doors for Shadow Seekers membership. They're going to be open from 5/25 to 6/1. There's going to be a lot more information coming soon about that. And then on 5/31, we're going to do a shadow work, energy work Q&A. So that's a chance for people to just get all their questions in and get them answered. And there will be more information to come about all of that. And just to let you know, too, Mother's Day is on Sunday. I know that Mother's Day can be a hard time for many people, myself included. So I'm planning to go live with a special, just 20 or so minute practice for anybody who's struggling on Mother's Day, okay? So I'm going to send out some more information about that. But if you are struggling or you just want to join me and come hang out, I'm going to be here live on that day, okay? All right, I'm going to see. I don't have any more questions. So if you got any, just drop them in the chat later, and I will get to them later tonight. And until next time, blessed be.